We begin to gather during the season of Epiphany, at the time in which we celebrate the arrival of Christ in the world, the light of God into the world, the revelation, the incarnation of Jesus for all the world, that we may know who God is in our midst. It's here. We're in this season now. One of the things, though, that comes with this idea and this understanding of light being present and gifted into the world is that there's what some people might call a dark side to the Epiphany. For you know that when light shows up, that's when shadows begin to show up around. Thought about that. When you walk at night through the forest, when the moon's not very bright and there's not much light around, do you create a whole lot of shadow? It's kind of dark. It's pitch dark, especially if the moon's not full. The nights in which the full moon or the street light guides us, there's long shadows, especially the further away you get from the light, that you can see for a while. But the shadow only comes out when the light shows up. The problems with lights being present, our sight, our lives, our world becomes aware. Jesus, just after his baptism and being tempted into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights by the devil, talking about an introduction to baptism. Okay, welcome, you're baptized, and he's driven out into the desert for 40 days of suffering and sacrifice on behalf of us and for all the world, right at the hands of confrontation with the devil. And so then he comes back and begins to teach, and he goes into the synagogue, as is his practice, wherever he is, and he goes into the synagogue of his hometown, pulls from the scroll from Isaiah and says and reads, "The Spirit of God is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, release to the captives, and the sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, and proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." He begins his ministry really in a Jubilee year. Some of the commentators suggest that this is the year of the favor, when things are forgiven, when debts are forgiven, when past wrongs are forgiven. This is a year of Jubilee. This is a year of goodness. And they spoke well of him. They were in fact amazed that it was him. And then they thought, well, you can help us out a whole bunch too. I mean, you're really good at this. Do for us what you did in Capernaum. And Jesus responds back, "Dr. Hill, yourself, you will say." The idea of someone who gives all the advice for everybody else, but everything else is in shambles. It's like when I say, you need to eat healthier, and then I go by and get a double cheeseburger in the drive-thru and fries. Doesn't really fit the situation. But we are all in this, we're all a little bit this way. Okay, when we are all about a bit this way. We have plenty of advice for everybody else, but not always, sometimes do we take it for ourselves. When we get in this debacle, sometimes we wonder what our next steps will be. We wonder sometimes when we get into the places we're uncertain, what will our job look like, or what will our relationships look like? What about life in general? I want what I want when I want it. Do this and do that because I want you to. Our sweet, kind, loving disposition changes suddenly when we don't get our way to a hurtful, harmful, and hateful way. I can't imagine situations like this in our day and world. Can you? I say jokingly. It's all over the place. If you do this like I want you to do it, I'm all about you. You do this not like I wanted you to do it, not how I think it ought to be done. I'm not about anything about you. We create separation all over the place. The light, the revelation, the presence of Jesus in our world causes us to see and to know with different eyes and with different heart. It changes how we see the world around us in a better way. Jesus, in this instance, in the temple, goes from the synagogue, goes from amazing to awful in a matter of words, such that they began to take him to the end of town and push him off the cliff. That's the equivalency of stoning. In the ancient world, they could stone you if you said something they didn't agree with, blasphemy. But you could throw stones, or also the person could be hurled off the cliff. Wow, you're like, this is not the sermon I thought it would be, but this is exciting, you know? This is what Jesus faced. From amazing to wanting to kill him, not within some months or days or after some sentences, but just a matter of sentences. He changes their perspective, their outlook, and everything about him suddenly because they didn't get what they were wanting. That's often the way it is with humanity. One commentator put it this way: anger and violence are the last defense of those who are made to face the truth embedded in their own tradition. Truths remain even if the one who is pointing them out is removed from the situation. The truth still remains. That's one of the truths about the strength of the situation. That happens all over. I mean, John the Baptist, that baptizer that baptized Jesus, was beheaded. Jesus had his own situations in such a way that wound up with a crucifixion but led to a resurrection. The Apostle Paul, who we just celebrated the conversion experience of Saul this past week, or observed in the holy calendar of the church, he was arrested and put in chains. Many of the disciples met untimely deaths. Very few of them died. We think maybe only the gospel writer of John died in natural causes. But circumstances, bringers of the gospel, aren't often welcomed in our world. John Wesley, we often appeal to him as the founder of Methodism in this way in which he inspired us, and he preached and he changed England, and he kept a revolution from happening in England. And yet, when you begin to dig into his journal just a little bit in the 1700s, he often faced mobs. They often throw stones at him. They went after him with clubs. They went after him with sticks. One account that I was reading about, one of the Methodist ladies who was a part of the movement, some folks began to come after Wesley, and she went after him and knocked out 3 or 4 men before anybody could stop her. So it was a little bit a little bit more violent than just what we think of. But you know, that happened, and it happened to John Wesley, and it did to Charles too. They were not welcome. Sticks and clubs. And yet Wesley in his journal often reported that he never felt anything. In some way he was protected from the clubs and the stones that came his way. But, you know, preaching against the quarreling and abuse of alcohol and to abolish slavery and prison reform doesn't always win you friends. I mean, it's been kind of a pattern now for a while. And yet somehow we still stay after it. Even prophetic witnesses across the years that show a better way of life for all people, both in church leadership and societal leaders. Greats like this morning, one of the Sunday school classes looked at Abraham Lincoln and his work and efforts. And then, you know, we just remember Dr. King last week and his valiant effort for inclusion of civil rights for all Americans. And others, even people in our own hometown here, have been met with less than warm welcomes in their efforts to bring about transformation of the gospel in the world. Holders of the light show to others a better way. And every one of them experienced a shortened life. And yet the task still looms before us. This week has seen rapid changes throughout our nation as we see resistance to mass deportations begin, from attorney generals in our states to law enforcement officers that refuse to schools that refuse to let soldiers and ICE in, to a response from Pope Francis about needless deportations, the head of the Catholic Church for the world. And then we saw on TV, many of us watching this week, as the new president was at the Episcopal Cathedral in Washington, D.C., where Bishop Budd asked for a plea for mercy from him and his administration, especially toward immigrants and to LGBTQIA people in our nation who are now more so than their normal fear levels that take place across our culture. Or even our United Methodist Council of Bishops, the collection of bishops across our denominations has released just the other day a letter addressing the plight of migrants and immigrants and refugees in the United States. I've printed those out for you at your entrances if you want to take one. Affirming the dignity and worth and rights of migrants, immigrants, and refugees. Urging one another to welcome migrants, refugees, and immigrants into our congregations, putting concrete support to them and helping them with navigating restrictive and often lengthy immigration policies and assistance with securing food, housing, education, employment, and other kind of support. There are other points onto that. But our Council of Bishops affirmed and felt a need to respond out to that out of the call of the gospel, the light of Christ in the world and in our hearts that changes us. One of those things about baptism that always gets me a little bit is we're not always sure what we're going to get into with it. Yes, we're welcome, we're invited, we respond to God's goodness, we respond to God's welcome, we respond to God's claiming us in our baptism. But one of the questions that we ask at baptism, do you resist evil in every form that it presents itself? And we say we do. And we continue that throughout our whole life, not even really knowing where we're going, what we're understanding, and how we're going to get there. But I thought this week in response to all the news, and I finally have had to turn it off and start watching programs from the 70s, which is a whole other set of issues. But I was really glad that I thought, well, I have a church and I know where it stands. And it's not there where we hear some of the talking heads on TVs this day. It's a place of welcome for all people. It was the first reconciling congregation in the city limits to welcome and include all persons into our ministry and our church family. And I was so grateful to be able to come here this morning, to be able to praise God and to give thanks for this bold witness of this congregation in the world. And I pray God's greatest blessings on it as we continue to move forward in the world, our congregation and our lives and all that we are. So we offer that up to God. All glory, honor, and power be to the one who is, who was, and who is